Hello, my name's Gary Ford, Managing Director of Tiger Hobbies Limited, UK Hobby Imports and Distributors, and welcome to episode 2, Britain's build-up for war. In the early 1930s, the British Army strength was just over 300,000 regular personnel and had spent time in the late 1920s experimenting with radical tactics for fully mechanised forces and the integration of artillery and air power supporting an attacking force. This was called the Experimental Mechanised Force, or EMF, a brigade-sized force formed in 1927, and the EMF participated in exercises that showcased the capability of a mechanised force, including the demonstration the value of ground-air cooperation with the Royal Air Force. The EMF basically gave the military the concept of a modern battle group. The exercises ran for a few years before the EMF was disbanded in about 1929-30. But it did advance the British Army into the first fully mechanised army. But the worldwide depression in the early 1930s gave the excuse for the UK government to spend a lot less on the armed forces. And by the end of the 1930s, the army strength was just about 200,000. Some overseas visiting officers looking at the work done by the EMF were very impressed. The concept of a mobile all-arms force coupled with air power, and one of these was German General Heinz Guderian. Guderian would go on to help form the German Panzer Corps in the 1930s, and the concept of Blitzkrieg or lightning war. Had the British given the Germans the blueprint for Blitzkrieg in the late 1920s? So, the British Army in the mid-1930s was a small, highly professional army, mainly used to patrol and guard the Empire overseas, with a few divisions back in the UK and about 200,000 territorials just in case the army needed an increase in manpower. In 1937, Britain could no longer ignore what was going on in Germany, and rearmament started, but mainly concentrating on defence such as radar and the development of fighter aircraft for the Royal Air Force and ships for the Royal Navy. In September 1938, the Munich crisis finally gave the UK the wake-up call it needed, but it would be too late for the British Army. Increasing the size of the British Army was not the problem, so by the end of 1938, the British Army had literally doubled in size, both regular and territorial. But its lack of spending and development on army equipment that would be its Achilles heel. In the 20 months or so from Chamberlain's piece of paper to the German attack in the West in May 1940, Britain's war production would go into full swing. But it would be weapons and equipment already in service that would have to carry the British Army until almost 1942. Behind me is a Pathy News clip of Britain's factories starting to ramp up production in 1938. Odd though it sounds, British factories were far more effective than the Germans, who would not take this war seriously as far as production goes until 1942, peaking in the summer of 1944. While Britain produced equipment like folks possessed from 1938 to 1945 without a break, with workers doing 12 to 14-hour days. This came at tremendous cost to the Treasury. Percentage of GDP was 2% in the mid-30s, 7.5% in 1938, 15% in 1939, 43% in 1940, peaking at 55% in 1943. We really did go for it. The British soldier was well equipped as far as infantry weapons. The SMLE short magazine Lee Enfield rifle, later the Enfield No. 4 rifle, Vickers heavy machine guns, Bren light machine guns, plus Thompson's and later Sten guns, would carry the British soldier through the war. Good, solid weapons. And we produced thousands and thousands of trucks and utility vehicles that again did the job well. But it was the heavy fighting equipment such as tanks and anti-tank guns that was simply not developed enough. So we had to go with what we had. By the time war started in 1939, we had 1 million soldiers, including 750,000 full-time and the thick end of 300,000 territorials. But heavy fighting equipment was poor. Development of new equipment started in the late 1930s, but would not be ready by the time the war started in 1939. Some of the tanks the British Army were equipped with were awful and done on the cheap, such as the infantry tank Mark I, seen behind me, costing less than £5,000 and armed only with a heavy machine gun. We had light tanks and cruiser tanks that were no better than the Vickers tanks used by the EMF in the late 1920s. Great Britain was part of a greater United Nations team in World War II, especially after 1941. You could argue that we did win World War I. The US came in too late. The Russians threw the towel in. The French were utterly exhausted after Verdun. The United Kingdom's main contribution, though, to World War II was stop the Germans during the Battle of Britain and buying time for the Russians and later the USA. To win a war, you must not lose it in the first place. The US ambassador to the UK, Joseph Kennedy, father of future US President JFK, was in technical terms a bit of a shit, sending messages to the USA that we were finished. Others, like broadcaster Ed Moreau, saw the never give up spirit of the British people, even though the Battle of France was a total disaster and what Churchill called the most difficult decision of the war, smashing of the French battle fleet at Mers-el-Kebir on the 3rd of July 1940. After the French signed the armistice with the Germans that would come into effect on the 25th of June 1940, the British were concerned that the strong and modern French battle fleet would fall into the wrong hands. The French assured us that it would not, but the British could take no chance and begged the French to sail the fleet to the French Caribbean for safety, but they refused. So Operation Catapult started under Admiral Somerville with an aircraft carrier, a battleship, 2 battle cruisers including the famous HMS Hood and other warships. Fleet air arm aircraft dropped mines in the harbour entrance and a number were shot down by French Curtiss H-75 fighters seen behind me, leading to the only British fatalities of the operation. The British capital ships opened fire and caused quite a lot of damage, killing about 1,300 French sailors, sinking one of the battleships and damaging at least 2 more, plus other warships. The British would attack again on the 8th of July 1940, causing even more damage. There would be clashes between the Vichy French and the British in places like Syria and Madagascar, and skirmishes in the air until the Allied invasion of North Africa in late 1942. One of the main things that this attack did was to make the world sit up and notice, especially the United States, and Britain would not give up easily and were in for the fight no matter how long it took. In part 3, we shall look at the British Army equipment and leadership in the early part of the war.